Okay. Don Whistler, Volume 3, Chapter 1. 11.7 thousand years ago. Long before the war and the flood, Olo was born to a Western man and a woman. A Western man and woman. He loved his parents and siblings. His father taught him to hunt. When he was 10, he joined his brothers to kill a woolly rhinoceros and made the killing blow. After wounding the beast, it turned to charge on them, pounding into the dirt. They scattered, but Olo's feet were planted. He swung his sling in fast circles, eyes trained to the rhythm of its gait, and let loose his stone. All of his concentration focused on the smooth rock. It seemed to Olo that the rock slowly down. Okay, that's messed up there. I need to fix that. It seemed to Olo that the rock slowed down and almost paused in midair. His perception of time was altered, and then the stone lit on fire and instantly glowed red. The group had turned once far enough away to watch him. They jumped back when they saw the flash. Olo seemed to expect it to happen. Olo seemed to expect it to happen, like he was willing it into existence. He did not flinch. He smiled. The stone shot out in the burst of energy and sailed deep into the skull of the rhino. The beast dropped to the ground and slid in the dirt to the rooted feet of Olo. They stared at him, dumbstruck for a moment, and then they all cheered. His oldest brother ran to him. "How did that happen?" he asked. He grabbed the sling and pouch of stones from Olo's belt, inspecting them. Olo shrugged and said, "It just happened. I thought I imagined it all until you all cheered. Then I opened my eyes." Page 2. Olo's brother handed back his bag and sling, then said, "I haven't heard stories of anything like what we just saw since I was your age, kid. But it was a different world then. More full of color, mystery. More full of color, mystery." Okay, I need to fix that too. On page 2, got another edit. More full of color and mystery, maybe. Stories of men bending the world itself, or slaying others with a look or a quick word. Followed along on the wind, but no more. And it seems unreal now, but people felt these things with their own hands and saw them with their own eyes. I know it. He pulled Olo in closely and grabbed him by the shoulder to look him in the eyes. Searching, not noticing the other hunters that had crowded around, he said, "I asked Father what happened, but he had no idea. After our homeland across the sea fell, a cloud shrouded over the world here. We live in shadows, but I have always felt the dawn will one day break. Then we will be able to harness the energies once again. We have forgot that strange things can even happen." They all worked together to strip down the rhinoceros to its useful and most basic elements that were stuffed into 3 packs in less than a couple of hours. The firestone of Olo had cut cleanly through both large horns on its nose, leaving a slightly melted edge on the break, each one the size of his forearm. Olo carried back both home as a trophy. Before they left, Olo had them all agree to never mention the burning stone to anyone. He didn't press too hard. They were all his elders and had every right to his respect. Even cousin Malice, who smelled like onions and was so skinny and frightened cat. Okay. Who smelled like onions and was so skinny and frightened that cats instinctively knew to chase him around town at will. Victim of cat bullies, apparently. That could be worded better a little, maybe. Who was so skinny and frightened that cats instinctively. No, that works. Let's see. Olo wrapped the horns but at the earlier page it needs it. Olo wrapped the horns in some cloth and put them at the bottom of his pack. Upon their arrival back in town, in his room, Olo shaved down the melted ends of the horns and fixed them to the top of his war helmet. Fusro Da, apparently. He's going Fusro Da style. That's a edit, or like a, what do you call it, a cliff note. That was page 2. Page 3 says, Olo's eldest brother Yinbo gathered lists of goods from the families in their village and waited for the traders' fair to roll through near the time of the full moon at the end of the month. When then waters were high at a bend in the river near the coast. That could be worded better. When then waters. Don't need that when. Or the then. Pick one. When or then. The merchants docked and set up shop for 3 days. 2 days before this, the youngest and oldest brother of the Colt family, Olo and Yinbo, set off on the road west, down in the winding path among the hills. The cool of the summer night was exhilarating and demanded fear. On the way, Yinbo spoke of many far-off and exotic places, and idly told many stories of people Olo had never heard of once. The wide and vast world Olo had grown up in now seemed relegated to a tiny portion of the corner of the map, which no one had bothered to ever show him. He spoke about the habits and customs of the sailors of the high seas and the rivermen who moved their barges up the streams inland for trade. On the rising tides of the waxing moon, they made their way upriver with the help of oxen to a deep swirling fork where the base of 2 mountains met and their waters merged. The name of the place in the first tongue of men was Azin Rul, the Hall of Kings. There were great and high-ceilinged rooms cut into the rocks of the deep-faced peaks that overlooked the docks lined with cranes. The temple held the ruler of the sailor tribe, a lord of their scattered nation, whose authority presided over this land. Yinbo continued on, telling all about the structure of the world. Page 4. They stayed on the path at night without incident. The forests along the way were rife with horrors kept at bay by the borders of the road. Runic stones connected a grid of energy to the temple within the face of the mountain in the crook of the river. The power of the system was generated under the mountain itself, which had been cut at an angle to form an inverted pyramid. The weight of the internal structure pressed down into a targeted point. That point was made into a type of press, and inside this pressure vise were many layers of various crystals, aligned so that their harmonic frequencies amplified one another in specific ratios that were all squeezed under the pressure of the mountain's weight above. This energy was powerful enough to radiate out for hundreds of miles in every direction from the temple. Yinbo spoke all about this at length in the still of the night to Olo, trying to explain some of the ways of the world. The sky grew pink and then orange as they topped the last hill before the river town and temple complex came into view. Olo pulled the reins of the thick horse that led their wagon. It neighed and nickered, fluttering its lips. They looked out and sat in awe of the grand view before them, with cool, moist air blowing up from the valley that whipped around in eddies at the pinnacle. Clear, crisp, honey and flower scents floated in the wind. The peace of that moment did not last. A loud and snapping crackling made them both spin around in their seat. Behind them, a large round black hole in the air formed. A huge man stepped through the portal, which closed directly behind him with a sharp click. The big man smiled at them, looking down on their wagon. He said in a voice so deep it vibrated the wood, "That felt good, really good. I haven't been able to do that in 10 years. Page 5. I had begun to forgot. That's wrong. It should be forget. I had begun to forget what I was waiting on, and the day's end always left me feeling incomplete somehow. Last night I was dreaming. I felt a surge of power course in and out, warping me. The eye in my mind opened. I saw what had been hidden these many years. When I woke, I knew my will once again was focused, clear, and potent. Letlow spoke to them calmly, but with a fervor behind his eyes, as he sat cross-legged in front of them. Even while sitting, Letlow was several feet taller than Yinbo. Olo guessed Letlow had to weigh 1,000 pounds at least. Olo started to speak, but Letlow slowly held up a finger, the size of a man's arm, for him to pause. A catch formed in the back of Olo's throat. Silence permeated the air. Letlow looked Olo over. As Olo, that's a typo, it says old next to it. As Olo was again about to speak, Letlow said, "The temple in the valley is prepared for us. We can speak in confidence there. I will open a portal for us to jump through." The huge man began to get up as Olo finally found his voice and courage and said, "Wait just 1 second here now. Who are you? And why should either of us trust you?" Olo's voice trembled. "Sir." Olo knew Yinbo should have already asked all of this, and it scared him to think that he might have to be in charge. That had never happened. It had always fallen on someone else. Letlow smirked a bit and looked at Yinbo, who said, "This is Letlow, lord of this land. We can trust him, I promise." Olo sighed and seemed to slump as he visibly relaxed and smiled up at them. Letlow conjured a portal and they all stepped through. Back in his throne room, Letlow smiled back at the pair of brothers as he walked to a stone rack set into the wall near his seat. Letlow turned and rattled around in the objects on the shelf and found a small gun that fit into the palm of his hand. With his back still turned to them, Letlow said, "This weapon relies on a different set of rules in order to function than what happened to your rhinoceros, Olo. I felt it when that happened. I was expecting it, just not quite yet. You are an early bloomer, and impatience is woven into you. So I have stayed prepared. We were prepared." Letlow ran his fingers over the weapon. He flipped a switch. A red light glowed, and a dim hum came from the gun. Letlow turned towards them, but kept his gaze fixed on the weapon and said, "This gun uses the power of sound to twist around echoes which amplify progressively to magnify their reflections, increasing on a logarithmic scale until the sonic containment field erupts into a concentrated blast. A torsion pattern that relies on the harmonics sound is defined by inciner... Okay, I need to reword that. A torsion pattern that relies on the harmonics sound, should be harmonic sound, is defined by, and then it should have another word there. It has to fit together better. Incinerates the air around the energy beam, making a shock wave." Letlow paused and smiled, then continued on looking at the pair. "Now, did either of you understand all the nuances of the ideas I just expressed?" He raised his eyebrows, and they quickly shook their heads. "No." Letlow smiled, satisfied, like a cat that was picturing an eaten, mangled canary. Letlow raised the gun quickly, with a flash of his hand, and fired a beam in between the brothers. An orange bolt of fire cut through the air with a loud clap that fluttered through the air and their clothes. Yinbo jumped into the air and in a panic ran at Letlow before he could consider who he attacked, or how wise of a decision that might be. Page 7. Yinbo charged and screamed as loud as he could, a spear thrust away from Letlow. A spear thrust away from Letlow, he fell backwards like he had hit a wall. He didn't move. Olo scrambled to him. He shook Yinbo, but was knocked out. Shallow breath still pulsed in Yinbo's chest. A force field of some fashion invisible to the brothers buzzed and clicked as the device on Letlow's belt reset and automatically reactivated. Letlow followed the gaze of Olo down to it. It blinked brightly and then zapped. A blue transient glow flashed for a moment around Letlow. It loudly crackled in the air and then faded. Letlow smiled gloatingly and said, "I see you have been introduced to one of my pals here." He patted his hip and said, "An intelligent machine can have the same effect on our world as any life, and doubly so in my case, since I haven't met the man with reflexes to match those of my trinkets." Letlow laughed loud, It boomed down the empty hall. Letlow grinned to the side and said, "The look on your face is priceless, Olo. It won't hurt you. I have set it to block incoming threats, but I can adjust it to trap and crush those unwise enough to deserve such a fate." Letlow began to pace from his throne and slowly circle in towards the brothers. He stared off into the corners, seemingly interested as he orated an explanation to his guests. This device is merely a barrier. At its root, the energy is composed of the same harmonic resonance amplification used to focus echoes and power the gun I used in our little, demonstration. Letlow paused. He seemed unsure of how to continue. "I am sorry, Olo, to you and Yinbo, but I had to check. The stakes are too high, and either of you could have been a shapeshifter using an appearance-altering spell. I had to personally gauge your reactions after being startled." Letlow went and sat now on his dais. Olo unfroze and slowly sank to the ground. He sat down on a stone, his heart pounded still. Olo looked behind them at the pieces of statue that littered the ground. He looked around and realized many separate small piles of rubble lay about the vast interior. "Do this a lot?" Olo questioned. Letlow shrugged, looked at him and said, "I know you, Olo, who you are deep down. I know that person. You are older than you know, Olo, and I am here to watch over you. That's been my mandate." Page 8. "Many a day have I sat on this throne only to drink wine all day. I forgot it all. And I knew it, like wandering in the mist. I am haunted. Feelings of loss and dread follow me, stalk me. In my isolation I have been cursed. I have always kept watch over your home and your family, but because the magic faded, I had forgotten why. But I remember now." Letlow shook his head slowly and looked at the ground incredulously. "The traffic from the trade fair here is amusing, but it was frustrating knowing I was missing a piece of myself. I am wrung out. I have sent for another from our order, Olo, to tend to the duties here. I am leaving, and you are coming." Letlow paused and waited for any retort, then got up. His long silver hair waved in the breeze of the still before the dawn as the brothers walked behind him. Yinbo swayed in his steps. A hair. That needs to be reworded. Shouldn't be a comma there. They walked through the streets outside his castle, lined with shops and vendors from all the surrounding regions, still buttoned up for the night. The moon was gone, and the black night seemed to swallow all the sounds. It induced panic and a calm sense of suffocation. At the docks in the distance, a bard began to strum out a rhythm. Olo stopped, happy to hear the music as it cut through the tension he perceived. A light, lilting tune danced across the wind, spiraling in the breeze. He looked and noticed they had kept walking. He followed him again, whistling the faint song. And it says as old, but it should say Olo. Messed up there. Autocorrect. As Olo plodded along behind them, he looked up and saw the first purple streaks of light in the sky. A raven soared down, dimly lit from behind, and perched on a lamp post. It cocked its head at Olo as he passed and began bobbing its head in sync with the tones. The bird flew up and followed them. From above it barked out the percussion section. It crowed down at them, soaring in dips in step with Olo's whistles. And they all looked up at it. Letlow said, "I guess that's how a raven would sing. We will get what we need from the head of the merchant's order near the river, and then be off. You can say your goodbyes when we return. No time." That's the end of chapter 1.